Welcome to Not Going Quietly, the podcast where we inspire growth, beat down biases, and get into all sorts of good trouble, with co-hosts Jonathan Beal and Britt East.
No topic is off limits as we explore ways to help everyone leap into life with a greater sense of clarity, passion, purpose, and joy.
So get ready to join us for some courageous conversation, because Not Going Quietly starts right now.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Not Going Quietly, the podcast for outraged optimists and heartbroken healers all over the world, where we surface life-searing truths in the name of radical togetherness. My name is Britt East, and I'm your host. My co-host Jonathan Beal is still out on sabbatical, so it's just me, but you're in luck because I have a fantabulous featured guest today, Alex Amorosi. I can't wait for you to meet him. We're going to have a really great conversation. So let's just dive right in. Alex Amorosi has been practicing and teaching spiritual healing arts for over 25 years. He began his journey as an agnostic and skeptic. That's kind of like me, I feel like, and has spent many years coming to understand the subtle realms of the mind and reality from a grounded analytical perspective. I love that. He has extensive knowledge of human, energetic, and physical anatomy from almost 20 years of teaching yoga and almost 15 years practicing Reiki and energy work. He has evolved a unique approach that combines coaching, energy work, yoga, and physical movement, meditation, and teachings from modern and classical spiritual traditions. Alex has been studying and practicing astrology since 2016. He incorporates ideas and techniques from the Vedic astrological tradition of India, the Hellenistic astrological traditions of ancient Greece and Rome, medieval astrology, visual astrology, and evolutionary astrology. Alex finds the symbolic language of astrology to be a powerful method for understanding oneself and the patterns in one's life. Alex is a practicing Buddhist and classical music enthusiast with a special love of Mozart, Sibelius, Mendelssohn, and Berlioz. He is a history and philosophy buff, cat dad, proud gay man, and member of the LGBTQ+ community, aspiring fiction author, and a general lover of life. Alex, welcome to the podcast. How the hell are you today?
I'm awesome, Britt. It's great to be here. Thank you so much. I'm just so excited. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's going to be such a wonderful conversation. So let's just dive right in. I like to, hit hard right from the beginning. So let's just go for it here. And,
let's do it.
Where I wanted to go first was I always like to kind of lead with disclaimers and caveats. And for right now, I want to set a certain segment of society to the side just for the purposes of this conversation. And so let's stipulate for the record that, there's a certain percentage of population, certainly in the US and probably all over the world, that would love to just wish queer people away, if not eradicate us or send them away. They just don't want to think about us. They don't want to know us. They just would love to just, so even if they're not willing to admit that to themselves, there's just a part of them that they're not open. They're not really open to being in relationship to us. So let's just take that segment of society and move them to the side just for a moment, just for the purposes of this conversation. I'm not advocating, not engaging them, but just for this conversation, because I want to talk about another segment of society and speak directly to our allies and all of those people that would love us given half a chance. And so my question to you, Alex, is what would you like to tell those people about queer people that you think they might yet not already know?
I think what was just coming to you as you were speaking, Britt, is that we can't always be as strong as we try to seem we are, and we need help. And that's a hard thing for me to admit as a gay man. I mean, I didn't even realize until recently, like how much and I have had I will say, a relatively privileged existence in our community, relative to many others in our community as well. But that there's something about the nature of our experience where we have to bear a lot on our shoulders, and we sort of compensate for that in different ways, right? Where we're funny, or we're like, oh, I've got it, I can do it all, I've got it all together, or whatever whatever brand of gay we've compensated for to keep ourselves safe, And I would love our allies to know we're not as strong as I think we try to portray ourselves to be sometimes. And we need help, and we need shoulders to lean on. And I want that also in the community for ourselves, where we can lean on each other more. And, there's all sorts of conversations we can have about that. But, I feel like that's really important for our allies to know. And also just to know that even within our community, how diverse we are. The diverse experiences, when you sit down and you talk with a room full of queer people, and you hear the backgrounds and the stories and this led to that, led to that, led to that, and what they've experienced in the community as well as outside of the community. I'm sorry, 1 second, Britt. I'm sorry about that. I just want to get that before my cat goes crazy. But if we only knew those stories in the community and we could communicate them to others who could understand that we're not as strong as we always appear, we need help, and that we're extremely diverse, and the diverse range of queer experiences needs a voice. I don't know exactly how to do that. That's just what I know it to be. But that's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, it seems really challenging. Like, I empathize with our allies and our would-be allies. The language is always changing. We're all different. We're like this uneasy coalition of people that in many regards don't have that much in common. Even culturally, when you take us as in the aggregate, like groups of lesbians and gay men, how much do we have in common culturally in the aggregate, or trans people, or bisexuals, or, whatever. And so I could see if you identify as straight and you maybe only had cursory experiences with queer people, it could be like, hey, where do I begin? How do I get my arm? I don't want to do any harm. I don't want to offend anybody. I would love to be there for Alex, but I don't. How do I support him? I know he's not like my other gay. He's not like this, this trans person I know. They're different, and I don't know. It's all so complicated, and I've got kids, and I've got 3 jobs, and and so you can see, I have a tremendous amount of empathy, and we need all of the help. We require all of the love and assistance and support that you just articulated so well. It reminds me of the slogan, the marriage equality slogan, "Love is love," and this is my new pet peeve, because over time, it's become kind of it's like nails on a chalkboard, and everybody says it. And I'm, out on social media, I get "love is love" kind of spewed at me. And so maybe it's just they're nobody's fault. I've just heard it so much. But I haven't really, you're the first person I'm sharing this with, Alex. I haven't really had the heart to tell anybody. I'm kind of embarrassed, to be honest. It's so sweet and well-intended. But I think it inadvertently erases part of our culture, or cultures, as I was just saying. It's like as it seeks to normalize us to straight audience, as it tries to sanitize us and make us palatable in some drive-by form of diversity and inclusion. So here's my question to you. What are some ways that love is not love, meaning ways that queer love can sometimes be different from straight love?
Well, if we're going to get really candid, it's also sex is sex, or, sorry, come on. At least for those of us who are in our community of sexual orientation is the way that we're different from the norm. Yes, it's about love, but I actually, Britt, you're in good company, because I've never wanted to admit that to anybody too. I'm like, yes, love is love. And I understand the legal reasons that was used, right? Like, I get why that was used in the fight for marriage equality, and like, okay, here's all the good gay people, and they're just like you, but we're not just like you. There's so much, like, my best friend is straight, and he's been my best friend for 25 years now, since the freshman year of college. And there's things like we can talk about, and he's super supportive, and he asks wonderful questions, and he's always willing to learn, whatever. But there's certain things like he's never going to quite understand, because I can't tell him about like certain things that he would get it, but he'd be like, what? You do that? Like, so there's that part of it. But I also, it's like, yes. And I also think that it sanitizes, honestly, our sexual experiences. And that it's something to make people feel comfortable with not having to think about the fact that gay people have sex. And it's none of their business anyways. It's like, what goes on, my sex life is nobody's business but my own, or who I choose to share that with. But I think that there's I get the rationale behind it, Britt. Like, I get why that was done. But I also think, even within the community too, it's maybe going a little bit tangent to what you were saying, but the advocacy issues are so different. And what we need as gay men is different from, what the trans community needs right now. And they need a lot of help right now, is different from what, my friends who are bisexual need. Is different from, there are even differing advocacy needs within the community that make blanket umbrellas like that, I think, are getting harder and harder. I think it was easier before the marriage decision from the Supreme Court. And now we're really beginning to realize there are a lot of very varied advocacy issues that need attention, and specific attention, in order to continue to keep us all safe.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, especially as two white cis gay men, we're kind of at the top of the pecking order of social privilege, and we reaped a lot of rewards from respectability politics, in particular marriage equality. I, for one, am married, so I'm getting all of those rewards, but that fight did nothing to help trans youth. That fight did nothing to help bring healthcare to queer people of color or what have you. And so, like you're saying, there's a bill that's coming due for white cis gay men, whether single, partnered, or wherever on any continuum. And so we have to be part of the helping hands as well. I was chuckling earlier when we were speaking. It's like, I don't want to be the gay docent in the museum of homosexuality. I don't want to be, it's just boring. Like you're saying, I've kind of done that. And, so now that I'm old, it's like, here's some stuff you can go Google or read or whatever, but you have to somehow, meet me where I am, and I'm going to be, authentic and real. I mean, maybe I'm more of a pot stirrer than you. Maybe I'm more like of a brat than you, but it's like, I'm going to be all of me and be provocative and stir the pot and drop the mic. But I'm not necessarily going to explain everything to you. Then you can go home and you and your wife can Google it or whatever and stuff, or I'll help you if you have, legitimate questions. If you come correct, as folks say, it's like, if you show you've done research, if we have, built up a relationship of love, trust and concern. I've heard you, and you just kind of shared about that. You have a lot of straight friends, men and women. There's certain things that they'll never truly understand, like you were just saying, because they don't have the requisite lived experiences. I'm trying to be delicate and here. So here's my question to you is like, then why is it essential for queer people to foster loving relationships, and I mean both platonic and romantic, with other queer people, even cross-culturally within the community?
Oh my God. I mean, I can't even enumerate the reasons. It's we're all interconnected, and we're interconnected not only physically and within the community, we're interconnected energetically. We're interconnected. Our hearts are interconnected with each other. And we have to, I always say, as a cisgender gay man, because that's the only experience I can ever speak from. I would never presume to speak for anybody else in our community, and especially as a white cisgender gay man. And I think that when we don't feel safe to advocate outside for ourselves, right? When we don't feel safe to say, like, we're to look at the system that gets at us all the time in one way or another. And it's just like, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, do you guys have anything else to do? Like, why are, like, Regina George and Mean Girls, like, why are you so obsessed with us? Like, we're not obsessed with you. You can go off and lead your lives. Like, why are you so obsessed with us? We're just kind of going off doing our thing, like living our lives. And it's interesting because I think that when we can't put that energy outwards because it feels unsafe, we turn it on each other. We turn it on each other as gay men. We turn it on we inadvertently or advertently turn it on other people in the community. We have inter-community fighting with each other. And some of that is actually really necessary to raise our awareness of things that we, didn't know or were willfully ignorant of. But I feel like love, I have tried to, in my older age, expand my definition of love a little bit. And I always thought romantic love with 20, when I was 20, everything is romantic love. Everything's romantic love. I'm like, oh my God, you love me. Amazing. That's fantastic. Now I'm thinking, we need to expand the definition of love inside the community so we feel safe with each other enough that we can then pool our resources outwards. And I don't feel like I feel like we just take a lot of the rage that we feel or the discomfort that we feel or the spiritual disconnection we feel, and we either turn it in on ourselves, which is really common, or we turn it in on ourselves and then turn it on each other because it's almost like we don't know where else to put it, you know?
Yeah, that's the number one. I talk to a lot of people coming out and stuff, and that's the number one complaint I hear from other queer people is, why are gay men in particular, I'll just say that because it's us, why are gay men so mean and to one another? Yeah. And that's the number. Like, I didn't want to come out because gay men eat their own. They're so mean to one another and so vicious and so cruel. And I can't help but wonder if part of that comes from, okay, let me say it a different way. And I'll frame it as a question to you. How can we entice queer people, especially, we'll frame it as white gay cis men, to require more from society instead of scrambling for crumbs from the table of joy, as the old saying goes?
That is I haven't heard that saying. And that's really what it feels like, I think by first demanding more, honestly, demanding more. And but also, Britt, like you said before, not spoon feeding questions that can easily be Googleable. Easy. There is, I don't know what exact year you came out, but I came out in 1997, just after Ellen, it was huge, I was so excited to come out after Ellen. And there weren't any resources available. There was no internet. There was there was one organization in Boston called Bagley, which was Boston Association for Gay and Lesbian Youth, which is still functioning and a wonderful organization, but there were no resources. So it's like, I had to sort of figure this all out on my own and, kind of go there and whatever and kind of figure it out with other gay men and try to figure that out together. And I almost feel like now there are so many resources. You can Google gay people coming out. You're going to get like 400 million, hits on Google. You can look at that. And I feel like for our straight, right now, I feel like particularly with what's going on in Tennessee, I can't even believe I'm saying the phrase, the drag bands that are going, like they have nothing better to do again. But we need to pool our resources for other things. It's like, I don't necessarily want us anymore to feel like we have to beg for respect, beg for love, fit into the gay that you want me to be. I'll speak as just as a gay, so that I'm safe. And equally done that with men and women. Like I still at 43 years old, Britt, catch myself reflexively butching up around straight men. It just happens. And trying to be the funny gay around straight women, right? Just trying to be like, oh, it's so funny. And I'm like, your dress is amazing, girl. And look the Gucci and like all that stuff, whatever. And I never realized until, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago that I was doing all that to keep myself safe. And no idea it was a trauma reaction. I had no idea it was just so I could get a little semblance of safe feeling. And this is speaking as a white, cisgendered, as you said, gay man. We are in privilege, the top of height of privilege within our community. And the other thing that I think is really important about this, following that point, is that we're always told as gay men to deserve less, to think not deserve less, that we deserve less or to expect less. to expect less from life. You don't deserve an absolutely phenomenal relationship. You deserve a tolerable relationship that you kind of make work. You don't deserve incredible, sexual connection. You deserve like whatever you can get here and there. You don't really deserve a place in society unless we feel comfortable with you being there, which means you have to kind of look like us and kind of act like us and kind of have the life like us. And I don't know what's happened to me in the last few years, but I'm like, I'm not fucking interested in that anymore. I'm interested in being my fucking self. Because if I don't do that, then I'm spiritually disconnected. If I'm not connected to who I am on a really authentic and true level, then I'm spiritually disconnected and I'm of no good to anybody in our community or anywhere else. So that's my long winding way to that. But yeah.
Yeah, it's like when some of us first start the coming out process, it can be so tempting to fall into a clique out of necessity, out of physical safety. So many of us wade into the coming out process slowly, looking for any port in a storm, frankly. And so it can be easy for us to start mindlessly following the rules of whichever segment of queer culture happens to embrace us. And maybe that sounds harsh. I'm just trying to be very clear, not necessarily harsh. I certainly understand and empathize with it. But especially if we have never been embraced by any strong cultural figures, like most of us as queer people grow up in straight families who, even with the best of intentions, have no lived experience through which they can transmit queer culture and points of reference and traditions and rites of passage. And, all of that we have to go find for ourselves, like little treasure hunters. And so it seems like part of the maturing process for us as queer people is how to hone our uniquenesses and cultivate our individuality, even as labels start to fall away and conflict. At first, we embrace the labels. It's thrilling. We slap it on our back and we try to live up to these labels. But it seems part of it is being a middle-aged queer person. It's like shedding the labels, witnessing the diminishing returns.
Yes.
And so I guess my question is, how can queer people summon the courage to stand out? Obviously, we're in, we have a wide range of experiences and we have to keep ourselves safe. But assuming that we're ostensibly safe, assuming we have our, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, assuming we have our basic needs covered and we're kind of ostensibly safe, just in general, how can we as queer people summon that inner courage and strength to start to stand out?
I think for me, and this is from my experience as a spiritual teacher for a long time now, you have to have a spiritual connection to who you are. And that doesn't mean, I really want to be very clear about this, and I'm glad you brought this up, Britt. I think when queer people hear spiritual, they hear religion, and they hear scary, and they hear bigots, and they hear that, no, thank you, Alex. Please stop talking about that immediately, because I don't want anything to do with it. That was me. That was where I started from. I'm like, fuck no. Keep that all for yourself. I'm a materialist atheist. There is none of that. It doesn't exist. And if we don't have a connection to our bodies, and particularly to our hearts and our solar plexus, where we really receive that intuitive knowledge of what is right for us and what isn't, what feels good and what doesn't. If we don't begin to clear that connection so we understand on a felt level what is right for us, it's hard to summon that courage because we're not connected to the true well of who we are in the first place. And like you said, we're on, whatever label it is. Like, I was tall, twinkie gay boy when I came out. I was 19. I'm like, okay, well, that sounds good. I'll be a tall, twinkie gay boy. And I'll wear my tall, twinkie gay boy clothes. And this was 2000, so I had my puka shell necklace and my frosted tips. And that's what I did. I thought that's what you looked like. I don't remember XY Magazine. Do you remember XY Magazine that was out like that era? I remember looking through that and being like, oh my God, that's what I need to look like, It's so like... Oh my God. And now I realize I'm like, yeah, actually, there's a lot about me. When I connect to who I am, it allows me to be this big, mix of all these strange things that I never would have considered myself to be. Like, I love astronomy and astrology equally. I am a big gay man when it comes to my musical tastes. I am a Madonna, Cyndi Lauper, Cher. I'm just like a walking stereotype, right? But I dress like an LL Bean dad. Like, you know, it's like whatever. It's like, you know, it's all these things. And that's my identity now, you know? It's like I am no longer, I mean, I grew out of being a twink a long time ago. I'm not that age over, but I can't fit in any label anymore. But that's come from me. That's come from years and years of introspective work and healing work to understand all those facets of myself are beautiful and they're very individual to me. And as yours are to you, and as anybody listening, as yours are to you, it's that connection into my own heart, I think that's really necessary to understand who I am and my spiritual connection to myself. That's what builds and begins that courage.
Yeah, it's like the richness of life is in the contradictions and paradoxes and eccentricities. Right. And as a young person, you know, with our age delay, you know, speaking in the aggregate again, at least when we were growing up, I have no idea what kids are like anymore. Yep. But when we were growing up and coming out, it's like we had to go reclaim our youth. And so a lot of us were involved in vapid, boring, silly, fun, like teenagers, except we were 30. And so it's like we had to go reclaim a part of us that was frankly stolen by straight people, you know, and it was taken from us. And so it was a righteous act. And eventually that gets boring and we kind of move on like you're describing. And I started tearing up, actually. You described it so beautifully. When you talked about going down to the source and the wellspring. And, you know, I guess for me, what I think of is that regardless of our physical differences, our abilities or proclivities, it just seems like everything starts with the body. Yeah. Regardless of who we are, where we've come from, what we think or believe, that's what unites us. Our bodies may, of course, look different, function differently, et cetera, but we all have them. And so it's like it starts with our relationship with the body. So I guess what I'm getting at is, what are some ways that queer people can learn to fall in love with their bodies, particularly if they're not as white, young, masculine, or athletic as we have structured our society to tell them they should be?
Oh my God, amen. Oh my God, amen. Yes. Seriously. Because like, what is even like, you know, just on that point, Britt, and I definitely, I want to talk about this. I think it's really important, but you know, what was the ideal when I keep feeling like we're so old, but we talk about like, you know, back in the 80s and 90s, the ideal was this big buff dude who was like, that was the ideal. And it's like, well, that's what I have to be. And then it's like, well, yeah. And they were white, who were mostly in public figure, you know, most of them were white. And, there was not a large representation of trans people that I saw, at least at that time. And so, or bisexual people, you know, anyone else in our community, even lesbians. And I think that we have to fall in love with your body is to recognize, to me, it is a once in infinity creation. And I really want people to hear that, like, whether you are spiritual or whether you're completely material, your body as a construction has never, ever, ever existed the way that it exists now. And it never will again. For the blink of an eye that we're all here on this planet, whatever we're doing here, you know, that's open for discussion too. I still wonder about that. Your body is a once in infinity creation. And it is your best friend. It loves you. And it is every second of every day communicating information to you. And the biggest thing it's trying to communicate to you is it's on your side and it has your best interests at heart and it wants you to listen. And we've been trained, Britt, you know, from cis hetero spiritual institutions into an adversarial view of the cosmos and whatever we believe to be bigger than ourselves. And so we are therefore at odds with our body too. We have to overcome things. It has to submit. It has to be this way. It has to be this different. Rather than saying, my fucking body is a divine creation. It is to my or it is just here in the middle of, you know, 14 billion years of the universe being around, just happens to be here for this period of time, and that makes it beautiful. But it always has your best interest at heart, and it's always communicating with you. I can't emphasize that enough, and it's always on your side. That information that is coming to you is always on your side.
That is so fucking beautiful. I almost can't stand it. I love it. I've never thought of that like that. That's really touching. You make me cry again. You know, I've always been an athlete. I've always been really competitive. But where I first started to fall in love with my body, I remember the moment. It was in a yoga class. And
me too.
Yeah, Alex and I have a lot in common, and yoga's practice is something that we both love. And Alex has been a teacher for a long time, as we said in the intro. And I went to my first yoga class, drag kicking and screaming, eye rolling the entire way, making bratty, withering remarks to my poor boyfriend at the time. And I did my first seated twist, and it was like there was a hallelujah chorus. I mean, it was just like decades of toxicity and clenching and lack of forgiveness, and everything just started to be released or drained, or whatever metaphor you want to use, from my body. I was in an intro immersion class where I went every day, 5 days a week for, I think it was a month at a time. And I kept kind of re-upping because I fell in love with it right away. And this was Iyengar yoga at the time. Since then, I practiced a lot of different kinds, but this was Iyengar yoga. And I just had this like quasi-religious experience, and I absolutely loved it. And I remember thinking that I was beautiful for the first time in my entire life. And I was 25. And I had never thought I was beautiful until that moment, which is absolutely heartbreaking and a kind of pathetic a statement of society, like that somehow I was allowed to exist in this space. Looping back to our previous thread about how we get support from straight people and allies and each other. Somehow I had eluded that support and was allowed to exist in this space where I deemed myself, and particularly my body, to be unworthy. And so I guess where I'm going is, I'm hoping, Alex, you can share some about your yoga practice, what you teach, and how this kind of, like you talked about, this deep wellspring and integrating your life. Like, okay, well then how does it actually work on a tangible corporeal level? Like how are you manifesting that with your body?
Well, I think, it's interesting too. I had a similar experience when I was probably my fifth yoga class. We were doing Warrior One, one of the standing poses. And I remember I was so dissociated from my body too, from traumas and different ideas, that I didn't even understand where my legs and my hips were. And so I remember clearly the moment I was like, what are hips? Do I have hips? I didn't know that. Right. I had no idea. I was like, that's cool. Thanks for telling me. And then all of a sudden I felt my hips drop about an inch. And what I realized was, it was such a small movement, but it was me feeling like in an environment where I was doing something physical, I did not have to be on guard. Mm-hmm. I did not have to be worried about, okay, what did this person think? And what did this person think? And did one of those boys see that my wrist flapped? And that I dropped the football because I don't fucking care about football. And who gives a shit? I was like, I just want to sit on the bleachers and talk to the girls like every other gay. Come on. That's what I want to do in gym class. Please. So I think that what yoga has become, I think it's become so many things. And I want to say clearly too, that this is modern Western adaptations of yoga, right? As it's developed into the West over the last, especially over the last 20 years, it's become so popular. But is that you have to place your body in such unusual shapes relative to what we're used to, that it forces you into a reckoning with the felt experience of your body.
Oh my God. Wait a second. That is so fucking beautiful. Alex, you gotta say, that could go on a t-shirt. That is amazing. So you have to what'd you say? You have to force yourself into a reckoning of the physical experience, something like that.
The felt experience. So let's say, so there are poses, you and I've done yoga for years now, like downward dog, right? Downward dog is fairly basic, done in almost any yoga class. If you do yoga for a while, downward dog. But it's a very unusual thing to do, to put your hands forward and your feet back and to try to form this V and try to where your shoulders are, whatever. And, you know, when I'm training new yoga teachers on how to teach poses, I've trained yoga teachers now probably almost as long as I've been teaching. And I will often say most of us in our society, not all, but most, are in our heads and our intellectual process, and we're sort of not feeling neck down. So when you give a cue, sometimes someone won't even know how to turn their foot a certain way because they haven't done it before in a really long time. And so or in a really long time, or I haven't done it before ever. So when that person finds in downward dog or warrior one or warrior two or whatever, that motion, it forces them to reckon with a sensory feedback from their body that they may have been really needing to feel for a long time, and recognizing that, you know, speaking of that wellspring inside of you, there is a wealth of felt intuitive information your body is communicating all the time. And when you go into yoga poses, and this can happen in all other kinds of movement too, yoga just happens to be where I found the safest place to find this. It forces you to reconnect on a felt level to your body, and that's where all the information is. And so I cannot emphasize, I think, in the healing process, how important embodied practices are. And especially as queer people, Britt, right? Because we often run up here because the body doesn't feel safe, or it feels confusing, or it feels scary, or it feels whatever, or there's been abuse or trauma or something where we've just run, oh, not safe there. And so practices, you know, and Qigong is like this, Tai Chi is like this, they're even, you know, and dare I say it, sports can be like this too, but where you come in, I'm not a sports person, but so I rag on sports a little bit, but where you have to recommunicate with the sensory experience of your body, because there's so much information there and it's on your side. Like I said before, it's on your side. It's trying to care for you.
And then what do you do with all that information? How do you leverage it? How do you absorb it all? How do you where do you take it? So you're flooded with this information, maybe for the first time in your life. You may not even speak the language. I bet it's overwhelming. I'm sure it was for me. I can't really remember, but how do you start to leverage it and move forward?
Well, that takes some time, and it takes really good guidance. And it depends on what the goal is from that. The way our predominant method of thought in the Western European mindset, European descent mindset, is analytical intellectual thinking. We analyze and we intellectualize. Generally, that's kind of what we're taught to do: sort and assess and divide and understand in that way. The information that comes to from your body does not come with a bullet point list of why it's coming in and what it's trying to share with you. It doesn't say like, well, this is actually February 3rd, 1997, and what you're feeling here is 1989. It doesn't do that, right? It's just like this information, right? So the primary way when I'm working with people on their intuition, how to trust their intuition, what I say on a very general level, does your body get tense or does your body relax? And it doesn't mean when your body gets tense, there's something malicious happening. It just means it's not right for you, or you're not resonating with something, or it reminds you of something that didn't feel right. Or does your body say, like you just feel like you sit down with somebody for the first time, you're like, oh, I just like you. I can relax, I can breathe. And the other thing I teach from yoga all the time about that is, when you meet that person, is it harder to breathe or is it easier to breathe? And your breath will tell you everything too, because your breath is intimately tied to your nervous system and intimately tied to your autonomic nervous system and your fight-flight response. And so I think that it's easiest to start with that. But also what I found, and this is a general statement, Britt, of just a lot of yoga teaching from my experience as a yoga teacher, generally your energy system and your body, which are intimately connected on that felt level, know just what to release when to not overwhelm you. And that's why it's always so important when you're doing any healing work that you have good guidance around you. You're not push yourself beyond that, because it can be re-traumatizing, right? Because it goes into that thing that's too deep, and then you seize back against it to not go into it. So, but I would say that one thing: does it feel like I relax, or does it feel like I get tense? That's intuition's basic function.
That's so amazing. Thank you so much for that. And let's move a little bit along the maturity curve. So I've been practicing yoga for, a couple years now, 18 months or something, and I'm starting to develop an ear for what my body is telling me. I'm starting to develop and cultivate an eye for the present moment. And then something shifts, and the world and all of its brutal glory, not the world is beautiful, society and all of its brutal glory is still society. So then how can we as queer people maintain our sweet, sensitive souls and our tender hearts in these cultures that tend towards the brutal and the primitive, like the US?
I think that's why it's more important than ever that we have spaces where we can gather together to do these practices that are spaces where we feel it's just us. It's just us. And, I want that space too, Britt, because the tender, I've been realizing lately I've put on a lot of armor in my life that I didn't realize was there. And I could say it wasn't armor. It was easy. I'm just being funny or just whatever, but I put up a lot of armor. And sometimes I'm like, fuck, I don't want to fucking put up any more fucking armor, but I also don't necessarily feel in every space. And this is not an indictment against yoga spaces, but not in every yoga space do I feel safe to completely trust and listen to myself as a queer person, because I don't know the people in that space. And for me, and again, this may be a generational thing where we are in our generation. It may be different for the younger people, but there's a reflexive tightening when I'm around straight people. It's still there. It always has been. And it may always be. I just have to be mindful of it and recognize I'm safe and these people aren't going to harm me and they're perfectly fine and lovely. And it's not an indictment against all straight people either. It's just what my body does naturally. But I think also that it's another sort of call to arms, I would say, oddly enough, for developing your inner life and your inner connection. You call it your spiritual, is to develop your inner life and your connection to your own heart. It's why I love Buddhism so much. It's why I've always loved the Buddhist teachings was, reconnect in to who you are in your own self, and that can also be the ferry that gets you across the river some days. That yes, yes, the world can be harsh. Yes, the world is harsh towards us, and sometimes it feels like it's getting harsher. And it's definitely getting harsher towards certain segments of our community, like trans people and gender nonconforming people. But when you can have a moment to go inside of yourself, even if you take 30 seconds just to breathe and to notice your own heartbeat, it gives you a little bit of that oasis. It's not going to fix everything, but it gives you a little bit of an oasis. I would start with that. That's probably my number one question from clients as I'm busy or things come at me or I don't know how to do it. I say, take 30 seconds, just put your hand on your heart, feel your heartbeat and breathe. It does things energetically and physiologically to soothe you. But also, Britt, the other thing I just want to say quickly on this too is, I got too locked into in the last 10 years, that sort of solo healing, right? I'm doing my healing. And I had friends I could talk to about stuff and whatever, and it was fine. But I had to realize I also want to sit down with a group of gay men and talk about it. Like talk about, this is what I experienced. I want to sit down and let it go and not feel like I have to, kind of be up on guard around my own, so to speak, and I think we're getting there, but that's something I've been wishing for lately too, in terms of community.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess that kind of, we've touched on it before, but, bringing it back, it's like, then how do we cultivate these loving connections during this epidemic of loneliness without succumbing to all the social pressure and even the capitalist forces out there that punish and shame us for being single?
Oh my God. Britt, would you have another podcast ready for that one? Because I could go on from that. That's a good three-part series on that question. It's so funny. Okay, so thank you for me. All right, I'm going to go here. You might have to just stop me. But, it is a capitalist thing. I never thought of it like that until someone else said it to me. I'm like, oh, fuck, it really is. But like, and loneliness, one of the things to differentiate in mystical practices, whatever the mystical tradition is, not just Buddhism or the traditions that come from India, but from China and Japan and from even the mystical forms of the Abrahamic religions. There's an idea of solitude, right? Where there's a certain amount of our spiritual life that is always private and always internal. It just is the way it is, our connection to that deepest part of ourselves. Even those closest to us wouldn't know. But there's also in Buddhism the idea of the Sangha, which is the spiritual community, which is you also need to be with other people in order to communicate about what's going on with you and to speak about your journey. And that when you're going, especially, in that sort of monastic community, you're facing some deep, dark shit inside yourself. You are facing some of the really tough shit that you need some guidance and support and a shoulder and an ear to work through with it. Now, about loneliness, and we'll get to the single part because that's the part I could go on about. Loneliness, I think, is something that is part of the human condition, but has been exacerbated by the illusion that we're more connected to each other than we really are. I can go on Instagram and see all my friends, and that's the classic social media paradox, right? It's like we have all this connection, ostensibly, but I'm not sitting here having this lovely conversation with you, right? I'm not having a real conversation with somebody about really important things. And I went through the pandemic single. I'm a pretty classic introvert. I'm gregarious in my own, but I'm a pretty classic introvert. I'm pretty good on my own. And I've been single for a while. I mean, I've had 6 months things here and there and whatever, and they've been fun and whatever, but I'm generally okay on my own. And I've just been taking a lot of time in the past few years to really discover who I am as an adult and as an adult man and what I want for myself. And I had to do that by myself. But the look on people's faces when you say you're single and you're in your early 40s, it's like all of a sudden, it's like they get they're looking at you like they're trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. They're like, really? Wow. Why? But you're so handsome, or you're so smart. I'm like, I know, thank you, but I don't know who I am. And they're like, why am I explaining this to you? And then and the assumptions that come at you and all the stuff that comes at you. And it's hard to say to people, I'm really okay. Some of the loneliest, for everybody listening, I'm fine, including my mother. I'm fine. I'm fine. Jesus, it's like, Christ. And of course, and then you also feel, Britt, like you have to say, of course, if someone wonderful came along, I would be excited. I feel like you have to just go, there's this whole dinner, index cards you're handing out to you. And so there's that. And it's interesting too, because my intuition, one of the reasons I started on a deeper spiritual journey was because I was really getting into bad relationships. Not like that's a mediocre relationship, bad relationships, emotionally toxic, emotionally abusive, go down the list of manipulative, go down the list of traits. Just that was the relationship that I was in. And because of conditioning there were certain traumas that I had that conditioned me in that way, but also a conditioning as a gay man and growing up in the era we did. I just thought this is normal. It's normal to feel anxious all the time. And it's normal to try really hard to make someone love you. And it's normal to be treated as a sort of second-class citizen in someone's life, because I felt like a second-class citizen in the world. And so it didn't even occur to me till 2012, which is when I really began this work of wait a second, this isn't normal. It's not normal to be treated this way by someone who's saying that they love you. It's not normal. And so I began this work as a way of figuring out what I was doing there, because I had been trained as a gay man to accept less. And also, if I may say, to not ask for anything in my relationships. Don't make waves. I don't want, God forbid someone should leave you. God forbid someone should think you're too much. I'm dramatic. Look at me. Look at my hands. I'm a big drama queen in a lot of ways. But that's not bad. It's just who I am. I'm a Leo rising. I'm a drama queen, and I spent, and so reason what I'm getting to with that is I had to develop my own connection to what I knew to be right for me, and also know what my value is, not my worth, but my value, what I bring, and not accept something to make other people feel comfortable with my relationship status, or to try to just make something work, but to really have what I genuinely want. And I genuinely am okay. If that comes along, that's wonderful. And I would be excited and happy. If it doesn't, I'm also okay. And I feel like that place of equanimity, I've took my machete and hacked through the rainforest to get to that. I'm just like, get me there, girl. And now that I'm there, people are like, but why? Why are you single? It's just like, so anyways, that's my long
so hysterical. My God, you're killing me. And what you're describing in some ways is so empowered and beautiful, and you took charge of your life, and that's certainly a component that's really important, and I don't want to get lost. But let's look at it through another lens. It's quintessentially American to place a premium on the value of self-directed choice. Yet in my life, I've often found serenity by swimming downstream. I mean, it's almost like I inevitably suffer when I fight the forces of the universe. And in that way, I can't help but kind of chuckle and wonder if the fault really is in our stars. And I guess my question to you is okay, how can we effectively harness and channel our vital empowerment that you described so well in that story just then, while tempering our enthusiasm with the humble awareness and acceptance of our destiny?
Oh boy. That is the conundrum of any divinatory practice, astrology included. That's the great conundrum, right? And one of the things I don't think we realize how much in European thought we have descended from either you are religious or you are material. You are a humanist and they triumph for the human being, or there's only this sort of weird parental figure God that hates you for we can't even figure out why and whatever, right? There's either or. And the mystical traditions were the answer for me, because I was like, oh, okay, here's a connection back to my wellspring and source, and also recognizing that exists in everyone else. It exists in you. It exists in everybody listening. That same awareness, that same open love exists in every single one of us. Now, this is my belief system. I'm not going to say, ask anybody to believe anything they don't want to believe, but that our souls reincarnate through lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. Trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions of incarnations. And all for the sake of experience, not to learn lessons, not to be told by some greater force, like you did it wrong. It's just kind of like, well, I had a hamburger yesterday and today I want burrito, right? It's just like, just experience and variety of experience, that once in infinity experience of your body, right? Of being here. And so, when you look at someone's astrology chart and you look at, I think what I believe I'm looking at is the plan, the sort of arena, the rules of the game they wanted to play by in this lifetime. And destiny and fate have very negative connotations. And what I say when I'm working with clients is you have absolute free will. You have so much free will that your creative source will not override your free will over your desire. You have that much free will. However, there are certain things that light you up. Like for you, like music, right? Music always lit me up. I always loved classical music. My dad put on Bach's, I think it was Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring, or it was one of the organs. When I was like 7, I was like, what's that? Like, it just lit me up, right? I've always been interested in human nature. What makes us tick? What's our connection to the greater universe? Whether that's a material connection in terms of astronomy, or there's more philosophical arts like astrology and different sorts of energy work and the understanding of the subtle universe. And so fate is, there's a saying now in modern spirituality, you're the totality of possibilities. That's true. But you don't want the totality of possibilities. There are certain things that light you up. There, like you say, when you go downstream, there are certain ways you're just happier. There's certain things you're doing that make you happier. And like, yeah, I could quit what I'm doing and become like an English lit professor. I would hate it. I don't want to do that. That's not me. That's not in my job. Someone else would love that. Somebody else would they would just go through every book and all that stuff. That's what they would want to do. And so accepting a destiny or accepting a fate has very negative patriarchal connotations that came from patriarchal thinking, that came from separative thinking between spirit and matter, right? And fate and destiny are certain things like I was destined to love classical music. I was destined to want to do healing. Have there been issues and things that I have to work with? For sure. That has been part of my path too. And we can vary within that plan. That plan is not set. You have free will to change and go here or there. But what it's saying is you came in with certain intentions. And I just want to say this quickly. As you live your life, you add to those intentions. It's not fixed from when you're born to when you die. Each of us, as we live our lives, we program new intentions of what we want, new desires and new ideas that we want to bring into fruition, that we want to quote unquote manifest nowadays. That's what we usually say. But yeah, fate, destiny is letting go of the oars. Where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say, and to whom? That's from A Course in Miracles. That's what I try to say. I'm not great at surrender, by the way. I'm kind of a recovering control freak. So it's like, I have to work on it.
Yeah, it's almost like you're saying destiny is done for us, not to us. It's almost like a platform of support that we can leap into life from.
Yes.
It's not it's not the Deus Ex Machina reaching down from on high and moving us like marionettes, puppets on a string. It's almost more like a supportive, almost you could even say generative platform. And I guess that, we've covered such a wide range of topics. I'm wondering, like, if you could talk a little bit about how you bring all of this together in your coaching practice. Like, what kind of tools do you draw upon to help all of the sweet, sensitive souls out there bring greater ease into their lives, build more connection, become more of themselves, and demand more of society?
I have a lot of tools over a lot of years, and I continue to learn. I'm still on a learning journey with all of it. I have, when I do, I'm going to go from astrology because some of other things I do. But astrology for me was my last holdout. I was like, that is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever done. In Jupiter, that can't possibly be true. And I wasn't just a skeptic. I was like a douchey skeptic. I was like one of those people who was like, well, I was like that guy at a party, like the horrible person. They're like, well, if I recite all my facts. And so, but I really began to see when I got a real, not just reading a newspaper horoscope, but I got a real reading with a real astrologer. I was like, that was enormously helpful. I don't give a shit about the predictive aspect of it so much for my life because I love the adventure and I want to see what happens in my life. I don't need the prediction. And honestly, the predictive aspect has never been particularly accurate. But what's been very accurate is how it's seen me, how I felt witnessed as a member of the cosmos itself, how I felt, oh, there's an order to this. There's a beautiful, like a symphony, right? There's an ordering of notes here that have made up my life. I feel seen. And I think, Britt, this is so important for us as gay men, as queer people. When we're told by dogmatic religion, we're abominations. We are evil. We are, that doesn't just affect the way you feel in society. You feel like you're wrong within the cosmos itself. That all of this go on for 93 billion light years that we can see right now in the invisible universe. You are somehow wrong because you're not gender conforming or because you sleep with the same sex or whatever it is. Somehow you're wrong. And what astrology told me when I got readings, you're right. Everything is right. All of this makeup of you are right in the cosmos. There's an order to you. There's a principle to you. The other principles I draw on are A Course in Miracles, which is very Christian language, and it helped me heal a lot of the Christian wounds I had. It's very mystical, and it's talking about really just the expression of the divine force is love. It's just love, and it loves you, and you just have to learn how to deal with being loved. But also I draw on some shamanic practices that I've worked with, which I'm incredibly grateful for. And my gratitude is indebtedness to indigenous traditions, and not everyone, because we've lumped them all together. There's all very, very varied in their experiences, but shamanic practices, shamans have known for thousands of years about inherited generational trauma, have known for thousands of years about different types of how the soul splits. Even psychologists will say how there's a split when there's trauma. You're talking about the soul retrieval, right? That your soul splits off into different places. I can't name my gratitude for that enough. But also, I think I will draw on any tool I have, any ability I have, any ability to work within the subtle realms to help someone know that they're seen, they're connected to this system, and that their place in it is right. Their place in it is right. They are correct. And when we can contextualize that, I've seen the weight just come right off. I've just watched it happen. Just comes right up. So those are some of the things I would say about that. I could go on for a while.
It has just been so much fun to talk with you today. I was so excited when we booked you to come on the show. I feel like I learn stuff every time I get to sit down with you, and today was no different. You blew my mind several times. I can't wait to go and rewatch this episode myself. It's absolutely fabulous. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Britt. This has been a blast, a real blast, and just a blessing. So thank you so much.
Well, listener, you've made it through another episode of Not Going Quietly, the podcast for outraged optimists and heartbroken healers all over the world, where we surface life's searing truths in the name of radical togetherness. I'm so grateful to Jonathan, my co-host, who couldn't be here today, but also for Alex, our featured guest, for all the wisdom that he dropped on us for an hour. And so grateful for your presence. I hope it was nourishing for you in some way, generative healing. I know it was for me. Every time I meet with Alex, I come away feeling so great about myself, frankly, and my place in the world. Alex has a wonderful website that will go in the show notes, so you don't have to scribble down a URL right now. We'll put that in the show notes. Got a fantastic Instagram page. He's funny. He's charming. He gives you all sorts of great content around astrology and yoga and all sorts of stuff completely for free. So please check it out. Again, we'll put that link in the show notes so you don't have to scribble anything down. And please check him out. He's a wonderful person. Obviously has a wealth of knowledge. So he would be a great person to have in your corner. Thanks, everyone. It was wonderful to sit with you today. We absolutely adore you. We couldn't do this without you. So thank you so much. Bye-bye now.
You've been listening to Not Going Quietly with co-hosts Jonathan Beal and Britt East.
Thanks so much for joining us on this wild ride as we explore ways to help everyone leap into life with a greater sense of clarity, passion, purpose, and joy.
Check out our show notes for links, additional information, and episodes located on your favorite podcast platform.